Welcome back to Breakthrough Actions video series on effective social and behavior change programming at the nexus of climate change and child early and forced marriage and unions. The previous video lessons introduced you to CEFMU and climate change and highlighted how to advocate for CEFMU and climate change integration in policy and program design. In topic 3, we'll explore how we can enhance community SBC capacity to foster social support for change and shift harmful norms that drive CEFMU in the context of climate change. Increasing community SBC capacity is a crucial step in understanding and addressing norms that enable harmful practices such as CEFMU to thrive, and which often have a disproportionate impact on vulnerable community members such as women, adolescents, and children. SBC tools empower communities to leverage local knowledge, resources, and social networks to promote positive changes in attitudes and behaviors, as well as empower communities to adopt sustainable practices when addressing harmful gender and social norms. Tackling CEFMU through norm-shifting initiatives involves shifting deeply ingrained cultural norms and enhancing awareness about the benefits of delayed marriage for girls' health, education, and economic opportunities. By leveraging local knowledge and fostering community participation, community-level tools and norm-shifting approaches can drive significant progress in ensuring the protection of rights for girls and adolescents. Topic 3 consists of 4 video lessons. In the next 4 video lessons, we will explore how climate change exacerbates harmful norms contributing to CEFMU, tools and evidence-based approaches to shift harmful social and gender norms, and we'll also explore the community action cycle approach and examine case studies from communities that have successfully fostered social support for change and shifted harmful norms related to CEFMU. Let's get started. Welcome to the first video lesson of topic 3, enhancing community SBC capacity to shift harmful CEFMU norms in the context of climate change. In this video, we will go over social norms leading to CEFMU and explore how they are impacted by climate change. Social norms are the perceived, informal, mostly unwritten rules that define acceptable, appropriate, and obligatory actions within a given group or community. They are the shared expectations and rules that guide the behavior of people within a community, shaping what is considered acceptable, appropriate, and typical behavior. Social norms refer to the rules governing a behavior, not the behavior itself. Social norms can both encourage or discourage a behavior and may improve health outcomes, such as the norm of giving birth in a hospital, or reinforce harmful practices, such as child marriage. There are many social norms contributing to child marriage. For instance, in Cameroon, the social norm among the Fulani people is that respectable girls marry after reaching puberty. In Malawi, for instance, the social norm is that girls who fall pregnant must marry the man or boy who got them pregnant, regardless of age. And finally, in Bangladesh, parents often fear the negative backlash from their communities for not marrying their daughters off early, leading to 51% of girls getting married before they turn 18. CEFMU impacts many aspects of a girl's life, including her self-esteem, education, income, nutrition, social development, and health. Girls who marry young tend to have more children and at a younger age. In a study of 25 countries, 3 out of 4 early childbirths came from child marriages. Early pregnancies and childbirth can cause health complications for girls due to biological immaturity, inadequate access to care, and financial insecurity, among other factors. Globally, pregnancy and childbirth complications are the leading cause of deaths for girls aged 15 to 19. CEFMU also places a burden on the societies where it is prevalent. Children born to young mothers are more likely to suffer from health complications such as low birth weight, malnutrition, or late development, as well as lower educational attainment and reduced earning potential. Governments and communities that face high levels of CEFMU experience economic burdens due to the health costs, welfare needs, and population growth associated with CEFMU. As highlighted in the previous video lessons, the risks of CEFMU increase as the impacts of climate change continue to worsen. This can be traced back to the norms governing the behavior of communities, which are sensitive to the impacts communities face as a result of climate change. Let's start with gender norms. Generally, gender is one of the key drivers of vulnerability and exclusion. It's also a key determinant of an individual's vulnerability to the effects of climate change. It is estimated that at least 200 million adolescent girls living in the poorest communities face heightened risk from the effects of climate change. In many communities, traditional gender roles dictate that girls and women are responsible for household tasks, such as fetching water and fuel, tasks that become more burdensome as climate change affects resource availability. As environmental conditions worsen, these gendered expectations intensify, limiting girls' time for education and increasing their vulnerability to early marriage as a perceived economic solution. When discussing gender, it is important to note that women and girls are not a homogeneous group due to the range of factors that influence identity and experiences, such as poverty, age, ethnicity, nationality, disability, and geographic location, among others. Although discussions about gender often revolve around women and girls who are disproportionately vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, men and boys also have unique vulnerabilities which should not be neglected. Patriarchal social norms regulating sexual and reproductive practices of communities often result in pressures for boys to get married as soon as they enter the workforce, and thus achieve perceived economic independence. This perpetuates cycles of poverty, lack of education, and locks families into unfavorable life course pathways. In addition, the families of boys can also seek income through dowry payments more frequently during climate-induced poverty, often as a last measure to cope with the pressures of financially providing for one's immediate family. Next, let's have a look at economic norms. The consequences of climate change for livelihoods, food security, and economic norms can be particularly destabilizing in low-income contexts. Girls whose families' incomes fall in the lowest quintile are more than twice as likely to marry before the age of 18 than those whose families' incomes are in the highest quintile. In contrast, education is protective. Girls with a primary education are twice as likely to experience child marriage as those with a secondary or higher education. In regions where bride price practices are prevalent, economic pressures exacerbated by climate change can lead families to marry off daughters at a younger age to secure financial stability. Bride price norms are regarded as an effective way to reduce economic burdens and protect families during times of scarcity and instability, further reinforcing the practice of CEFMU. In the 5 years following the 2007 cyclone in Bangladesh, 62% of all child marriages occurred within the first 12 months after the cyclone. The government of Bangladesh reported that the loss of the academic year, in addition to using schools as shelters for families, meant it became very common for adolescent girls to be married without their consent. Next, we'll look at community cohesion norms. In times of crisis, communities often revert to traditional practices believed to ensure stability, continuance, and protection. Driven by the need to prioritize immediate survival, CEFMU can be viewed as a protective measure against economic uncertainty, social unrest, and the impacts of climate change shocks and stressors. In many refugee camps, CEFMU is seen as a way of protecting girls against widespread sexual harassment, sexual violence, and rape, as the assumption is that a married girl is less likely to be targeted by perpetrators. Next, we'll look at education norms. Norms regarding girls' education play a significant role in climate change and CEFMU. In many societies, the value placed on girls' education is already limited. Climate-induced disruptions can further deprioritize education, as families facing economic hardship may view education as less critical compared to immediate survival needs, leading to higher rates of child marriage. As we can see, CEFMU is perpetuated by many factors such as patriarchal gender and social norms, poverty, conflict, and climate change. It's critical to ensure efforts addressing CEFMU are rooted in collective community action, which increases the likelihood of permanent change and a more sustainable shift at a larger scale. In the next video lesson, we will see how communities can be engaged through different tools and approaches for shifting social and gender norms that drive CEFMU. Welcome to the second video lesson of Topic 3, Enhancing Community SBC Capacity to Shift Harmful Norms in the Context of Climate Change in CEFMU. In the first video, we highlighted how norms, which are shared expectations and rules within communities, shape behaviors related to gender roles, economic practices, and education, all of which can be impacted by climate change. We saw how the impact of climate change intensifies gender norms, leading to increased burdens on boys and girls, which can then limit their education and increase their vulnerability to CEFMU. We also saw how in times of crisis and economic pressure resulting from climate change, communities revert to practices like CEFMU and dowry as protective measures. Now that we've explored how norms can be impacted by climate change and increase the likelihood of CEFMU, we're going to highlight a few tools and approaches for shifting harmful gender and social norms. Since CEFMU is mostly driven by social norms rather than individual preferences, communities and community-level approaches that are built on trust, empowerment, and sustainability must be at the forefront of addressing CEFMU. The next video lessons will explore tools and resources to carry out respectful community entry and to shift harmful gender and social norms that drive CEFMU. So please keep in mind that these are just examples, and there are many other SBC tools that can be applied to CEFMU in climate change programming. Please also keep in mind that it is always important to contextualize all tools you are using to specific country contexts. No two countries are the same. The first resource that we will examine is the Participatory Learning and Action Tool, or PLA tool, which is used to gain an in-depth understanding of a community and its needs. This is a great tool for ensuring your interventions will be tailored toward the specific country and community context where you'll be implementing. The PLA tool utilizes the following strategies. Participatory mapping. Participatory mapping is an exercise that allows facilitators to gather key information about a community, such as existing assets and expertise. Facility assessment. Most effective when done before project implementation, this tool is used to better understand the infrastructure and dynamics of the project area. By walking around the physical area with stakeholders and community members, this approach allows for greater awareness of how the physical infrastructure and interpersonal dynamics occurring in the community affect the community members' day-to-day life. Next, ranking. This tool can be used to capture the opinions, beliefs, concerns, and priorities of a community regarding climate change, CEFMU, and the climate change and CEFMU nexus. Participants are asked to identify a certain number of key issues related to both climate change and CEFMU and rank them relative to their importance, impact, satisfaction, etc. This is helpful to identify possible group consensus, highlight any intersections between climate change issues and CEFMU issues, and provokes group discussions. Next, semi-structured interviews. Semi-structured interviews are guided conversations with communities in which only the topics, in this case, CEFMU, climate change, and the CEFMU and climate change nexus, are predetermined, allowing for questions and insights to arise as the result of the discussion. Semi-structured interviews allow new questions to emerge during the interview due to the information the participant provides. This allows implementing staff and community members to share their expectations and experiences in a less formal manner than a survey or a formal interview. The next approach that we will examine is community mobilization, defined as a capacity strengthening process through which community members, groups, or organizations plan, carry out, and evaluate activities on a participatory and sustained basis to address issues like climate adaptation and CEFMU prevention and response. The SBCC Implementation Kit's Community Mobilization Toolkit highlights the following community mobilization steps. First, identify and access communities. Follow established legal and security protocols for entering communities, such as a Memorandum of Understanding. Identify key stakeholders essential in community mobilization efforts, such as local authorities, associations, organizations, and NGOs working on climate change and/or CEFMU, climate actors, advocates, and activists. Invite identified stakeholders and representatives to discuss the climate change and CEFMU nexus and determine action items. Then, train community CEFMU and climate change mobilizers. When training the mobilizers, ensure training contains factual and correct information about climate change and CEFMU and the impacts on communities. Establish a communication structure for effective information flow. Mobilizers need to liaise with community members regularly in a two-way process and be able to pass information to local, subnational, and national structures. For a community to effectively mobilize, communication must reach decision makers, leaders, and hard-to-reach community members. Next, identify community mobilization activities. Different community-based activities can be used to raise awareness on the nexus of climate change and CEFMU, encourage reflection, and promote positive behavior change that will drive communities away from CEFMU. Mobilization and advocacy activities can include organizing community-wide events, multimedia campaigns, marches, and public declarations. Now that we've explored different approaches to facilitate respectful community entry, in the next video lesson, we'll look at strategies to shift harmful social and gender norms that perpetuate CEFMU. Welcome to video 3 of topic 3. We're now going to look at tools and approaches to shift harmful gender and social norms that drive CEFMU. The next resource that we'll explore is a community dialogue tool from USAID's Passages project. This resource shows SBC practitioners how to plan and facilitate a series of 2-hour dialogues around harmful social norms over a span of 9 weeks. The group sessions consist of single-sex discussions at first, where a male gender champion will facilitate the men's group discussions. Likewise, a female gender champion will facilitate the women's group discussions. After week 5, the groups will come together for combined sex discussions and reflections. This is a tool that can be tailored to suit the contemporary nature of the CEFMU and climate change nexus. Week 1, Introduction to Sexual Gender-Based Violence, CEFMU, and Climate Change. During this week, participants get introduced to harmful gender norms in single-sex groups, how they contribute to different sexual gender-based violence practices, such as CEFMU, and how climate change exacerbates CEFMU. Week 2, Gender Roles and Norms. During this week, the single-sex groups explore gender identities, how gender identities affect everyday relationships, lives, and interactions with people. Week 3, Power, Status, and Violence. During this week, participants will explore how power imbalances can lead to violence in single-sex groups, characteristics of individuals or groups that make them disproportionately at risk of violence, and how power imbalances normalize, internalize, and justify violence. Week 4, Faith in CEFMU. During this week, participants will dive into what scriptures say about gender, gender equality, and harmful practices such as CEFMU. Week 5, Moving Forward in Reflections. During the last week that men meet with only men and women meet with only women, participants will reflect and discuss how to apply the learnings to their own lives, expectations, and how they can act to move towards a life free of CEFMU. Week 6, Looking Ahead to a World Free of Violence. During the first week of combined sex groups with men and women, participants come together to share what they learned in earlier community dialogues, with an emphasis on fostering safe spaces for honest conversations. Week 7, Child Spacing and Healthy Relationships. During week 7, the men and women will sit together with their partners to discuss healthy relationships, positive parenting, and child spacing. This week can also look at CEFMU from a child's right perspective. Week 8, Men's Involvement. During week 8, the participants will focus on the role men play in their communities, their families, how to embody positive gender norms, and how they can support efforts towards ending CEFMU. And week 9, Graduation Celebration. During the last week, participants pledged to promote positive gender norms, fight CEFMU, and take forward the lessons learned through the community dialogue sessions. The next strategy that we'll examine is engaging community faith leaders for norm change, using Girls Not Brides working with religious leaders to address child marriage guide. This resource encourages the engagement of local religious leaders in CEFMU interventions, recognizing the importance of faith leaders in communities. As spiritual guides, religious leaders are among the most respected figures in many communities and often contribute to prescribing which behaviors are acceptable or not. They can help change existing norms in their communities and be critical allies in the movement to end child marriage. In the last few decades, religious leaders from multiple faiths have contributed to addressing child marriage by collaborating with development actors, making public commitments, refusing to perform child marriages, participating in campaigns and trainings to build their own capacity to raise awareness about the harmful consequences of child marriage through their sermons. The following 8 approaches are recommended to effectively foster the engagement of religious leaders in successfully shifting norms that drive CEFMU in the context of climate change. The first approach is a baseline assessment of the religious context and current climate change impacts on the country and community. For any project addressing child marriage, SBC practitioners should always allocate enough time and resources to understand the country that they're working in and appropriately contextualize their interventions by researching which factors contribute to CEFMU in the chosen project site and country, which possible challenges could occur, and who to expect pushback from. Given the complexity and under-researched nature of the climate change and CEFMU nexus, keep climate change considerations such as how climate change is affecting the country, intercommunity, and women and girls at the forefront of your baseline assessment to develop resonating final messages that integrate climate change's impact on CEFMU in your community. The second approach is to carefully consider which religious leaders to engage. Consider which religious leaders to engage based on prior relationships, known reputations, and publicly declared positions on CEFMU. If possible, engage female religious leaders as it can challenge traditional patriarchal structures and facilitate contact with religious women who are otherwise hard to reach. The next approach that we'll look at is prioritize equitable partnerships. Understand that establishing trust is important, but can also take time. Start with issues that are less sensitive. Starting initial conversations with less sensitive issues allows time to build trust. For example, some practitioners in South America avoid using child marriage as a conversation entry point and instead focus on ending violence. The next approach, use positive language. For example, talking about, quote, encouraging positive fatherhood might be better received than, quote, fighting harmful traditional practices. This will help religious leaders identify as positive champions and reduce concerns that they could be seen as going against their own traditions. Highlight any work the community is doing to fight the impacts of climate change and integrate how those efforts relate to the positive outcomes of reducing CEFMU. With time and trust, it might be possible to engage in more sensitive discussions surrounding patriarchy, gender norms, the gendered impacts of climate change, and CEFMU. The next approach, engage climate change actors, community advocates, and religious leaders. Partnering with the local community and centering local climate change actors, CEFMU advocates, and local feminist groups is essential in developing appropriate messaging and approaches for religious communities. Many times, community activists and advocates are already doing the work, amplifying their efforts, facilitating introductions to influential leaders, and strengthening collaborations is the best way to build community capacity. In addition, be mindful of how different religious leaders perceive different individuals. Some male religious leaders only interact with male staff, and some female religious leaders only interact with female staff. Next, consider integrating sacred scripture as part of your engagement. Facilitating discussions around religious texts can help unpack interpretations used to condone child marriage and promote interpretations that support girls' safety and well-being. Expertise in religious scripture and excellent facilitation skills are essential. Facilitators and practitioners should not try to present alternative religious interpretation as the only truth or to impose it. They should instead provide a safe and engaging environment for religious leaders to discuss and to share their own reflections. The last approach is to find ways to address concerns about sex and sexuality. Concerns about female sexuality and pregnancy before marriage are often key drivers of both child marriage and religious resistance to end child marriage. These concerns are closely linked to notions of patriarchy, power, and gender norms. So religious leaders will need to challenge their own beliefs and attitudes to engage in constructive discussion. We'll conclude this video lesson by reviewing key guidance to effectively integrate norm-shifting approaches into SBC programs using CARE's Social Norms Design Checklist. As SBC practitioners, we often plan to challenge and shift harmful gender and social norms, but are not certain of where to begin and how to adapt our activities to include norm-shifting components. This is particularly common when working on complex and dynamic issues such as the climate change and CEFMU nexus. Programs that do not understand how to shift harmful norms may inadvertently reinforce them or be ineffective at challenging them. This checklist provides a practical guide for effectively moving beyond individual behavior change by providing examples of questions to ask while designing activities, examples of how to fill in any gaps identified, and what norm-shifting interventions look like. Let's take a closer look at the items on the checklist. Number 1, find early adopters and support them. Identify champions that already embody positive social norms and connect them with each other. Groups make it easier to stay motivated, organized, and encouraged. The Social Norms Design Checklist provides a mapping guide on how to identify groups and actors that are taking action to mitigate climate change and are already exhibiting positive behaviors that shift communities away from CEFMU. Next, map allies and ask for their support. Identify influential community members and networks needed to support positive change for communities and bring them together with those leading the change. The Social Norms Design Checklist provides an analysis tool to see what level of support is required for allies to be effective versus their influence to challenge and change the norms. For example, a religious leader in the community might need moderate support, but he or she will have high influence on norm change. This assessment can help you to prioritize support. Next, open safe space for dialogue. Create safe spaces that encourage community members to discuss new ideas and challenge harmful norms. Identify existing or new places where people can gather to view and discuss activities such as a street drama, radio, or TV shows. The Social Norms Design Checklist provides tools for critical reflective dialogue sessions, such as the Social Analysis and Action Manual and Tipping Points intergroup dialogue manuals that reach a broader range of community members than just direct project participants. Next, use positive, future-oriented messages. Proactively help communities imagine positive futures by using relatable, future-oriented, positive messages and statements during reflective sessions with community members, mass media communications, and other SBC participatory materials. This is especially important considering many communication efforts focus on communicating negative and harmful gender norms, which can be shaming and thus counterproductive when presenting ideas for positive change. Work with project participants, such as the early adopters, to develop materials that are based on their own experiences of the positive side of behaviors, change norms, and how it has impacted their lives. Next, prepare for action. Help communities move from envisioning possibilities of change to action which will normalize the positive behaviors. Encourage them to show up for change in their words and actions. Prepare participants and their family members or other allies by practicing activist conversations surrounding CEFMU and climate change. For example, practice how allies can step into conversations expressing views that perpetuate CEFMU and how allies can identify moments to educate community members on the climate change and CEFMU nexus. Have them practice intervening by using questions or offering alternatives. Now that we've looked at tools and approaches to shift harmful gender and social norms, in the next video, we'll take a closer look at the community action cycle, an evidence-based community mobilization approach that is applied to foster social support for change and community collective action. Welcome to video lesson 4 of topic 3 and Breakthrough Actions video series on CEFMU and climate change. In this video lesson, we'll continue to explore resources and approaches to strengthen community SBC capacity for climate adaptation and CEFMU prevention and response. In this video lesson, we'll take a closer look at the community action cycle, an evidence-based community mobilization approach used to foster social support for change and community collective action in SBC programs, as well as 2 case studies. The community action cycle is a proven and effective community engagement approach that supports community-led problem solving. It's an intentional process through which communities organize for action, explore the issues affecting them, set their own priorities, develop action plans, and monitor for improved outcomes. The community action cycle is composed of 5 phases. The first phase is prepare to mobilize. Prepare teams, materials, facilitator guides. This phase is intended to strengthen your team's ability to enter and work with communities. The next phase is organize the community for collective action. During phase 2 of the community action cycle, you formally approach the community and begin their involvement in addressing CEFMU and climate change. Here, you are going to establish trust and credibility, build relationships, establish a sense of ownership with the community, and invite community participation. You will also form a community action group, which is a core group of 10 to 15 individuals that will lead action on the community's behalf. Next, explore CEFMU issues and set priorities. In this phase, communities define their CEFMU issues, explore challenges, strengths, and set priorities. This phase aims to help communities explore their current knowledge, beliefs, and practices related to CEFMU. Next, plan together. In this phase, the Community Action Group develops a community action plan to address CEFMU based on local resources and local solutions. It is important to ensure that those most affected by CEFMU have a central role and voice in developing the community action plan. Next, act together. In the Act Together phase, communities implement their community action plans. A common tool used here is the Community Scorecard, which is a social accountability tool that helps communities standardize their way to track priorities and indicators, which is crucial in monitoring and evaluating. Let's take a closer look at a case study from Breakthrough Action Malawi's Child, Early, and Forced Marriage Initiative, implemented from 2020 to 2022. Breakthrough Action adapted and contextualized the community action cycle approach using principles from the Tostan Community Empowerment Program, including organized diffusion, setting communities' values and vision, human rights, and public declarations. Further, youth engagement was incorporated into the community action cycle to ensure meaningful buy-in by those most affected by CEFMU, and a strong media component was built into the model to support mapping, discussion, problem solving, feedback loops, and validation of community action plans. Community action groups were established, trained, and supported to explore and identify the key underlying drivers of CEFMU in their communities, and to develop and implement collective actions to address their identified drivers. Community radio outlets ran radio spots, programs, panel discussions, and call-in shows, and provided community updates on the project activities, ensuring that the community as a whole could hold each other to account on community action group identified actions. As a result of the community action cycle intervention and other project activities across the socio-ecological model, the project contributed to the following. In Chikwawa District, 184 marriages were annulled from January 2021 to March 2022, and 104 girls were readmitted to school. In Machinga District, the proportion of female child marriages annulled increased from 58% in 2019 to 68% in 2021. 400 child marriages were identified during the first year of implementation. 269 children, equivalent to 67%, were withdrawn from these marriages through discussions with the parents of the children and community-wide change and support. In addition, 149 children were identified as being at risk for entering into a child marriage, and all of these marriages were averted. The next case study that we'll explore is from Breakthrough Action Nepal's Local System Strengthening to Reduce Child, Early, and Forced Marriage, implemented from 2019 to 2022. Breakthrough Action adapted and contextualized the community action cycle to strengthen the government's institutional and technical capacity to reduce CEFMU. The project trained government stakeholders in 6 municipalities on child protection and facilitated the formation of 2 types of child protection structures as mandated by the Children's Act of 2018. The project trained local child rights committees on community mobilization, respectful community entry, and how to organize the community for action. Then the local child rights committees worked with 30 ward child rights committees at the ward level to explore the root causes of child marriage in each ward and to create community action plans to address them and reduce child marriage. As a result of this work, the project was able to achieve the following. 6 municipalities now have a child welfare officer serving under local child rights committees as member secretary, who is responsible for promotion of child rights, including protection issues and child marriage. Additionally, action plans developed by the ward child rights committees have been integrated into the government of Nepal's 7-step planning process at ward level, and municipalities have committed to include the action plans in their annual plans, policies, and budgets. To conclude, let's take a moment to pause and reflect on some key takeaways from topic 3. While an individual's or family's knowledge or beliefs are important for preventing and responding to child marriage, they may be overridden by social and gender norms or economic hardships. By working with the community to identify social norms that contribute to or drive CEFMU, program implementers can design norm-shifting interventions that help address the root causes of the practice, not just the knowledge and attitudes of individuals. Incorporating both SBC and community capacity strengthening components into CEFMU programming can help create an enabling environment within which communities can work to ensure that girls are able to live healthy lives, learn, and participate and access equal opportunities throughout their lives. Community-level tools and approaches, such as the Participatory Learning and Action Tool, the Social Norms Design Checklist, and the Community Dialogue Approach, are effective strategies that can be tailored towards educating the community on the CEFMU and climate change nexus, and thus be implemented to shift the social and gender norms driving CEFMU. And lastly, tailoring interventions to effectively engage community and faith leaders. Religious leaders are among the most respected figures in many communities and often contribute to prescribing which behaviors are acceptable or not. They can be particularly effective in shifting harmful social norms in their communities and be critical allies in the movement to end child marriage. Thank you for watching these video lessons on enhancing community SBC capacity to foster social support for change and to shift harmful social and gender norms that drive CEFMU in the context of climate change. Please have a look at the resources that have been made available to you in the description below this video. For the next topic, we'll explore strategies for improving parents and families' capacity and climate adaptation and their ability to prevent and respond to CEFMU.